to the Future, Grand Rapids version. We've done this in Holland in February, we did it in Grand Haven in April, and we did it in Muskegon in June. So we're happy to present this to Grand Rapids. There's the event today, but a very similar presentation will also take place at St. Jude's Catholic Church next week, Thursday. So if there are some breakout sessions that you were not able to participate in today and you'd like to get more information, or maybe you want to revisit a workshop that has been presented here today, please feel free to come next week, Thursday. It's going to be a great event there as well. So thank you for coming. My name is Bobbie Twa, and I am a career coach. And I work with individuals and businesses, and I help them successfully transition. And so what we're going to talk about today will be the ultimate resume. We all know that we need to have one. It's just a matter of what does it look like, what's the content, because it needs to be easy to read. It also has to have great content, or else you're going to be bypassed. You need things that will catch the attention of the reader, and we'll talk about that. Couple things that I'd like to mention to you as we get started. As you can see, we are being recorded. WOOD TV, Channel 8, I believe, is going to be doing the recording. All of the presentations will be available on either a DVD at a later date. It will also run, I believe, through the TV station at a certain period of time. And so what I just want you to do is feel comfortable with that. If you ask me a question, what I will need to do is repeat that question. So what I'd like to do is have you speak up so that I can hear that and repeat it so everyone can hear it. And also there is a clipboard being passed around. What I need for you to do is to sign and give us some contact information about who you are, the job title that you're seeking, and some kind of contact information. We do like to stay in touch with the people that we have connected with, and primarily that is done through email. So if you don't have an email address, I would encourage you to get one. It's very simple. There could be some people through your public library or a Michigan Works office that can help you with that. So ultimately what we need to do is talk about the resume then. My first question to you is, what does your resume look like? Sales tool or obituary? Is your resume something that just kind of says, well, I did this, 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 and this? Okay. Could it be considered more of the obituary? Could they put that in the paper and have that be part of what defines you? But ultimately, here's the deal. Whether you are an engineer, whether you're a nurse, whether you're an administrative assistant, whether you're production control, you are now in sales. Do you have a sales tool that you are working with? Also keep in mind that when anyone is selling something, anyone here in sales? Okay, we have a one, okay. Is it important to you that you know your product?
Yes.
Is it important that you believe in your product?
Absolutely.
If you are now that product, how well do you know yourself, and how well do you believe in yourself? That's going to be critical for you to see yourself as the product or service that you're trying to sell. So we don't want it to be an obituary. What I'd like to do is just point out a few things as it relates to the resume itself. It looks pretty simple, but there are some very important points here that I'd like to mention to you. Number one is looking at the resume that you're currently using. How big is your name? If it's a small font, maybe it's the same size as the rest of the information on your resume, you want for them to know who you are and not forget who you are, so your name needs to be about a 16 or an 18-point font. It needs to be bolded. Do something so that that will stand out from the rest of the information. The other important part about a resume is the fact that you need to be concerned about how are you using this real estate. 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. How are you using that? It's so important that you have great information, but you need to use that real estate very well. So one way to do that would be, and maybe yours is like this, do you have your name, then your street number, then your city and your state, then your phone, then your email, and then all of these things just kind of progressively take up real estate. And now you're into 2, 3 pages, that sort of thing. My suggestion here is utilize that real estate. So put your street name on the same line as your city and your state. That'll save a line because it's all about lines. Also, instead of having a separate line for your phone and your email, put them on the same line. And also, let me ask a question. Anyone here have a LinkedIn account? Put your LinkedIn account on your resume. And if you don't have a LinkedIn account, I would strongly encourage you to get one. If you're not real sure what a LinkedIn account looks like, feel free to visit mine, Bobbie Twa. I mean, there's a card, there's information out that gives you the correct spelling of my name.
Now, would that be the web address of the LinkedIn account?
It could just be LinkedIn and whatever the address is, so that either it punches it in, you know, in the address line, or it could just be something where you say, visit my LinkedIn account. Okay? The beauty of the LinkedIn account is the fact that you can get people to give you recommendations. It's kind of like a precursor to actually interviewing you. But it also tells the employer that you are internet savvy and you know some of these social networking sites that are out there. Employers are using them as well as individuals. Where would you put that? I would put it on the same line, and one of the options that you can do is you can either do it similar to this and just tab over, but another option might also be if you are up to speed on Microsoft Word, what you could do is insert a table. And then you can have your information here, 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 you have your name up here, and then maybe you add another column in there somewhere for the LinkedIn, or maybe you add it down here, but include that information. So what I'm saying here is just be concerned with how well am I utilizing the space and the real estate on this piece of paper. Now, I might also add a little comment as it relates to email addresses. If you have an email address that could, by any stretch of the imagination, be misconstrued, eliminate it. I had someone who had, and I'll make the story very brief, they were into boating and nautical. I did not know that. And so the address that they were using was naughty@something.com. Okay? If you have anything that could be misconstrued as inappropriate, there's people out there of all ages that may have something that could be misconstrued and be inappropriate. Use something very generic, even if it means having to create a new email address specifically for your job search. The other thing I recommend too, so that you have your resume something that is going to be pleasing to the eye, something that's going to maybe add a little bit of punch instead of it just being letters on a white piece of paper, and that is add some lines. It could be you could have a line that would separate your name and the body of the resume itself. Maybe you could add some borders, things of that nature, just to make it a little bit more appealing when you're creating the resume and for someone who is reading it. However, we do want to make sure that it's very easy to read. You need to have it be something easy to scan, something that the most important information is going to be at the top of the resume. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Your objectives specifically should be something where you can state what's the position and where are you looking to get this position. Are you replying to an ad in the paper? If you are, refer specifically to that job title and, at ABC Company. If you are using, by any chance, an objective that sounds something like this: seeking a full-time position, utilizing my skills and abilities to the benefit of the company. Blah, 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 blah. You're not telling them anything. Or I'm seeking a full-time position where I can get health insurance and work for a stable company. Not really anything that is going to tell them what is the position that you want. Okay? Also keep in mind that even though the resume is going to be about you, it really is not about you. I know that sounds contradictory. You need to always think in terms of what is in it for the employer. Why should they hire you? What is it that you have that they need that will help to solve the problems that they may have? Now, you don't always know what their problems are, but you could maybe read between the lines of the ad. Maybe you do some research, talk to people you know, do some research on the internet. What do you know about the company specifically? Here's an acronym to keep in mind. Oh, I guess I better use the other marker. Anybody a wife or has one? Okay, we have a few. WIFE, what does that stand for? What's in it for the employer? Always keep that in mind, because they are in business for two reasons. And they're looking to you as an employee or a potential employee for only two things, because as an employer, there's just these two bottom line things that I'm going to be most concerned about. Number one is, can you make me more money? Or can you save me money? Very basic, that's what an employer is looking at. And when you come in as a job seeker, you need to look at it from that perspective. What value can I bring to that employer that will either make them more money or will save them money? Do I have great ideas? Do I have a past experience at saving money, increasing sales territories, things of that nature? Okay? So when you are applying for a position, make sure, again, just to reiterate, that you're using the specific job title and the company. Your question?
Are you talking now specifically about the objective or about your resume in general?
Just your resume in general. I mean, this is going to be across the board as a job seeker. Any questions on that? All right. What you could also do is be sure to give the reader some information about you. You can have, okay, I did this, 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 and this at my previous employer, but they have no idea how did you make a difference. They have no idea who you are, what you're good at, things of that nature. Give them some kind of a summary statement of accomplishments or achievements. What difference did you make when you work there? Give them an idea as to who you are as a person. It could be that you are detail-oriented or that you have exceptional customer service skills. Tell them a little bit more about yourself. In my particular instance, I always worked for many years in something having to do with money. It was either with a financial firm, it was in mortgages, it was in payroll, it was in accounts receivable. Everything was related to money, details, compliance, disclaimers, and I just tell people, numbers take me to the side of my brain I don't like to visit, so let's not go there. Can I do it? Yes, I can. Do I like it? Does it come naturally to me? No, it doesn't. So if I just wrote all these things down that I've done this, 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 and this, I'm then telling them I'm also very good at it. But I'm really not, and it's not what I want to do. So give them some ideas to who you are as a person. Accomplishments are going to be huge. So take some inventory of what difference did you make with a previous employer. Any questions on that? So it could be that you're telling them that you do have a strong math aptitude, especially if you work in the engineering field. Maybe you're organized and detail-oriented. Maybe you exceed expectations. Maybe you do feel comfortable in front of a group of people and you could do some training and some presentations. Because so many people get really nervous about being in front of people. If this is something you feel comfortable doing, it could be something that could be potentially valuable to an employer if they know that that's something that you enjoy doing. So also give some thought when you're talking about your resume. Instead of using a phrase, and I'll just ask this as a broad question, anyone here have the phrases, my responsibilities were? We have, okay. I challenge you, if that's something you have in your resume, I challenge you to eliminate that completely. Because let me give you an example why that makes a difference. Your responsibilities may have been to make sure that a shipment gets out on time. You're responsible for making sure that your shift is fully staffed. Your responsibility was to get reports done on time. But what you really did was you scheduled employees, you demonstrated leadership, you may have verified information, you may have prepared and organized presentations. Okay, so the difference between what my responsibilities were and what did I really do. Take inventory using a list of verbs, action verbs. The most common resume style is the chronological version, which may be something that you're using, and that's fine. It's working with the most recent job and working backwards, okay? There's a lot of advantages to using that. It will talk about your loyalty. It could show a progression of your positions. Maybe you started out in shipping and receiving, you worked your way up, now you're a department supervisor. There's a lot of good reasons why someone would want to use a chronological resume. However, it doesn't always highlight what your skill set is. Now let me just kind of point out a couple things as it relates to, this could be something on the chronological and on any other format, but a couple things I'd like to point out. Have you on your resume, do you maybe list your employer first? And it could be in bold, and then you have your title in smaller type under there. I'm not too concerned about where you worked. I'm looking at job titles, so switch those around so that your title is at the top. The company is below that. And here's another thought. Anyone here looking for employment outside of Grand Rapids? Out of state? Okay. What if by chance your employer was Herman Miller? Now you're applying for a position in Nebraska somewhere. They're thinking, who's Herman Miller? I don't know who that is. I don't know what they do. And because it raises a question mark in my own mind, I'm not going to consider this any further. The suggestion here is consider a brief description of who that employer is. It may be Herman Miller, but what you may want to do is go to their website, find out what's their description of who Herman Miller is. a Fortune 500 company in the office furniture manufacturing world. Now it gives the reader a little clearer of an idea as to, oh, okay, he worked in office furniture, something of that nature. That could be transferable into our industry. Consider that if you're not using something like that, and not just if you're looking outside of the state of Michigan. But on the other side of that, it could be very helpful for somebody to know what the company is that you worked for, because they're small enough, they might not have a real community presence. Giving them a clear idea as to who they are could be helpful. Here's an example of some of the bullet points that I want to refer to here. Again, using bullet points, making it very easy to read, to scan. Starting each one of your bullet points out with the action verb. Initiated and implemented comparisons for cost savings. Now, the other thing to keep in mind when you're doing your resume and you're thinking of your accomplishments and the difference you made with your previous employer, here's another thing to keep in mind. Always think about what did I do that I can quantify. Is there something I did that increased sales, saved scrap or expenses? Is there something I did that I can put a percentage by? Is there something that I can quantify as it relates to another number? If you were a supervisor of how many people? Okay? Having something within the number realm is going to be something that's also going to catch somebody's attention. If you had something with $1 million in sales, what is going to catch the attention? Is it going to be something like this, or is it going to be something where you're adding zeros after everything? Okay? Use numbers. And again, this is just kind of a quick order of what it is we're looking at. One second. The objective and some kind of a summary statement, some strengths, maybe you call it core competencies. There's a lot of different phrases you can use in that regard. And then we can get into the work history. Your question?
You talked about using numbers, dollar amounts, percentages. When you're doing a resume from many years back, those things are a little hard to lay your hands on, even though you might have some idea in your mind. But somewhere, someplace, there's records that say really how much that was, and maybe somebody is going to be able to check that. So how do you handle that?
Okay, his question is, if I've done something in the past and maybe I didn't keep track of that sort of thing, but it is something that could be tracked with a previous employer, how do I know what that is? You aren't going to know, but let me give you a suggestion. Each and every one of you have a great work history, I'm sure. How many in this room have kept track of what you've done over the course of your career? Where you have a file of my annual reviews. I have a file of all the certificates of the programs, the workshops, the training that I've ever taken. I have a file that gives examples of my work. I might be really good at working with Microsoft Excel. And here you also have to be aware of making sure that you're not using proprietary information, okay? So it could be something that you keep going as you continue your career and you add information, but making sure that anything that you save or you keep is going to be something that either you block out the proprietary information or you recreate it without that information, that specific company name or whatever. But each and every one of you needs to have a file that goes with you, that's a living, breathing file all the time till you don't work another day in your life, that will exhibit what your work history has been over the years. Because without that, we end up with this problem. Your question?
I guess you can use your references too to
His suggestion is you could use your references as someone who could confirm that information, especially, sure, you could do that if one of your references is from that specific employer. And that's why it is so important. I interviewed a gentleman, one of the clients that I worked with, and I asked him this question. He says, I worked with Pfizer for 18 years. I asked him that question, and he says, you know, Bobbie, he says, I have everything. And I love that because it makes my job that much easier. It makes your job that much easier because now what happens is if you have not been working or seeking a position for many years because you've been working, now you have to recreate the last 20 years, right? That's a challenge. That can be a challenge. Yes?
What about kind of a technique of saying the company was this size when I started and being part of that team, we're now that size when I left? I mean, is that...
Okay, his suggestion is if you make comments about the company was this number of employees or this number of annual sales, now it's up to this point. Certainly, anything like that could help quantify what the situation and how the situation changed with that employer while you were there. Any other questions? Okay, we talked about the reasons why you'd want a chronological, and this just kind of reiterates that. Then there's the functional. Keep in mind that the functional resume typically does not include dates of any kind. It does, however, highlight your skills and things that you know how to do. Also keep in mind that it can give you credit for talents and skills that you have that you've used in a volunteer setting. Because if you didn't have the leadership opportunities with your previous employer, but you exhibit strong leadership skills as it relates to your community, your church, other organizations, you wouldn't otherwise be able to take credit for that if we only look at your work history. So what we want to do is look at you as a person who is well-rounded. What are the things that you've done that you didn't get paid for? If you volunteered,
and you've done fundraising and, you know, those types of things where you
could, but it could get lost. It could be, you know, because basically you're going to include volunteer experience that you have at the bottom of your resume. And you might have some awesome information at the very bottom of page 2. Well, they might not even get to page 2. Just as an example, when you're working with a functional resume, what you're using are categories. Instead of thinking about your previous employer and then working down, we're breaking it down into actual categories, in functions. What did you do when you were there? Do you have administrative experience? Do you have quality experience? Do you have leadership experience? What are your categories? Maybe you have an expertise in QS 5000 or 9000 or whatever it is out there, okay? It could be something that you may have done at more than one employer. Here's the thing. If you've done the same thing or very similar things at, say, 3 previous employers, it's pretty likely your information is going to be redundant, right? And that's taking up valuable real estate. But if you do it as a functional with categories, you're making that statement just once, and you're putting it under a category. Now, we talked a little bit about, the combination is the one that I recommend. I see a lot of it on the internet. It's something that employers They do like to see, especially for those of you who might be in your 40, 50, 60 age range, you've got some very valuable work history. How do you showcase that? The best way to showcase that is to break it down into categories so that then they will see that first and then they'll get down to what your work history has been. So what we're doing here is we're combining some features of a functional and also then some features of the chronological. So, also let me mention employment gaps. If anyone here has had a significant employment gap for whatever reason, it's been an economical situation for many of you. It's just not been something where you've been able to get a job right away. It could be something you've been off 6 months, a year, maybe more. My suggestion to you is have a good answer if you are asked at an interview. So, what have you been doing with your time? Because if your answer is like, well, you know, my wife had this honey-do list that was this long. Have you been getting training? Are you getting up to speed in your field? Are you doing some of your own self-education? Are you taking care of an elder parent? Do you have someone, a financial situation or a family crisis that you've been dealing with? Have a good answer for that question, because this is the time employers are looking at how well did you use your time. Were you drinking Diet Pepsi and eating bonbons? What were you doing during that time? Because if you've been working temp jobs, if you've been doing some consulting, if you've been taking a class here and there, maybe you're in the No Worker Left Behind program, there's a lot of different options that you could be spending your time with. But if you've been sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring and you've been spending all your time on the internet trying to find that perfect job and you're not networking, you're not talking to other people, you've just kind of become a little hermit, what does that tell an employer? That then tells the employer, okay, lack of initiative, not really self-directed. How well are they going to spend their time when they work for me? So, keeping the employment gaps in the top of your mind, how are you spending that time? Ultimately, each and every resume that you send out should be targeted specifically to that job, to that company. You should customize every resume. If you're making one resume and printing out 100 copies of that and you're expecting that that resume is going to work for you no matter where you send it, it's not going to work. Okay? I know this is a lot of work, isn't it? This is a lot of work. And each and every cover letter needs to be customized specifically to a name. None of this to whom it may concern, because their chances are ways, if you know the company where you're responding, if they don't give you the name, find out who is the hiring manager. This is a suggestion that one of my clients gave me. He says, Bobbie, he says, my resume is 6 pages long. And at first, I'm sure you're, 6 pages long, what do you do with 6 pages? This is what he does. For every position he applies for, he cuts and pastes and finds the best information off the master that he's working off of. And then you can cut and paste, you can move them around, you're not locked in, but you also aren't having to create something from scratch every time. Time saving. Question?
Some of the things I've been running into is on the internet, they'll actually job postings and then you go to their website and hit the careers and you put in an application. It'll say, do not call, just send to this email, and that's all they give you.
The comment here was when you're applying online to an open position, in many cases they will make a comment, no calls, please do not call. You have to honor that. You have to honor that. Whether it's online, or even in one particular case, we were talking to someone the other day and he said that he had gone to a company to drop off his resume. Well, maybe they had it posted somewhere, maybe he didn't see it, but they basically said, because you didn't follow the instructions, you're automatically in the trash.
So what do you do for the cover letter for a name?
If there's a way that you can research it, I guess the question is, how do you then get the name if you can't call? The internet is a fabulous tool. And if you can't find that information, in your networking, you may discover someone who's familiar with that company, and you can ask that question. That's what networking is all about. And if you've not been to the networking session, Ken is going to be doing one when we're done here. So feel free to stay, and you can get information on networking from Ken Soper. So we've tried to cover all our bases in that regard. Any questions on that?
So I do have a question. So say that you say it's very important to have a name, you know, when you send that in. So if you have exhausted your resources in your networking to say, no one is familiar with this company or can provide me with the name or of the information I'm looking for, you could go to the internet, go to that company. If they happen to have contact info, is it best then to just say, well, human resources, this is a name that they're providing, or do you just look for the titles to see what would best fit for that? Or do you just do like they say, you can't call down? How do you get that name then? Do you just go ahead, and there's got to be a limit of time too. You can't just, take 3 weeks to figure out how can I get that person's name.
Okay, your question is how do I determine who to send the letter to? Right. If I do find that there's some information on the website, on their own website for human resources or in the accounts payable department or something like that, sure, pull the name off of the website. But here's my other question. If you know where the company is and you have a question, can we drive there? Can we approach them and say, I'm trying to get some information on your company. Can you tell me who would be the contact for me to send information to? Is that how we do it in sales?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because what we're doing basically is we're waiting then for somebody to provide us the information. But here's the bottom line, folks. This is a game. This is a game. And you are an active player or not. And as an active player, you need to take the initiative to do things that you might not have otherwise felt comfortable doing. And it may require you to get in your car, you get all dressed up, you have your resume, you don't go with any intentions of having an interview, but maybe you walk in. Now this other person, he tried that and they must have had it posted somewhere, only apply online. So make sure before you do this, you get all your information straight. But maybe you show up and just say, who would be the right contact for me to send information for your accounts payable department? I have some information I'd like to send them. That's not threatening, and you're not leaving your resume. Unless maybe they approach you and say, you know what, we have a position open in accounts payable. Would you happen to have a resume you'd like to leave with us? A lot of this is getting outside your comfort zone, if it's not something you've ever done before. So ultimately, we want to have our resume specifically targeted to that job, to that company. You may also include temporary assignments. It doesn't mean necessarily that you have to include each specific assignment, but if you've been working for Manpower and they've given you 2 or 3 different assignments, your employer was Manpower. So include that on your resume. That could fill in the gaps for you. Keywords Important. I can't stress it enough. If there's a process that you know, leads or lean manufacturing, Kaizen, ADP payroll, any kind of a specific machine, maybe CAD, what version of CAD, tell me what you know. Because employers are looking for those keywords. They're just scanning it. They don't care who you are. They don't care how easy it is to read. If they're scanning them and they're saying, okay, I'm looking for somebody who's got ADP payroll, and you know ADP payroll, but you didn't put it down there, you just said, I know payroll, they're not going to give you a second look. Don't make it difficult for the interviewer or for the employer. The first thing that they are looking at is, what can I use to eliminate this person? What criteria are they giving me that I can automatically use as something to disqualify them for this position? Is it a typo? Does it not look clean? It's too much information. You're going on and on and on, and you have pages and pages. The first thing they're looking at is, how can I eliminate you? If you don't have ADP payroll, you're out of here. But I'm just going to keep those that do. If you have gone on to college, there's really no need for you to include your high school information. Plus the fact we really don't need the dates of your graduation, okay? As far as graduation is concerned, it can send a kind of a mixed message. In some people's cases, you might have your degree from 1978. Me, I returned back to college at 46, got my degree in 2003. So I'm kind of kind of giving them a little bit of a question mark. They're not going to know quite how old I am. But the thing is if you have some really good information as it relates to college, maybe you were on the dean's list, the president's list, you had a good GPA, things of that nature, include that information. You know it, but if they don't know it, it could make a difference. They might like 4-pointers. I mean, that's all something that can give you an edge. Your question?
What about listing, like I've gone to various colleges, I had my associates from one, but the others I've just been seeking a bachelor's but haven't quite gotten it, so I'd have several other colleges. Do I go ahead and list those?
Okay, the question is, we have an associate's, but we've attended several other colleges, and we haven't quite gotten to the point of having our bachelor's yet. Do we list all those? I would. It doesn't mean that you say you have a degree in these, but that you have attended these colleges or universities, especially if you've done some relocating and things like that. Question?
You mentioned leave off dates of your education. In most cases where I've applied, they want the date of your degree. And I guess my more general question is, what about dates in general? Because even though I worked at something 30 years ago, they want to know the day that I started and the day that I stopped. I don't know that anymore. What do you do with dates when they want specificity?
His question is related to dates. How do you complete that information if you don't know that information? Would that be inaccurate? Okay. You have to give them what they're asking for one thing. And if you don't, then it's like, well, he can't follow directions. So come up with something. I mean, you don't necessarily have to go any more than 15 years back, but I know that there are companies that they want to know every job you've ever had. The best thing you can do is make a good guess, because if you don't have it, but again, all of this would be helpful if we had kept track of this over the course of time. And I'll admit, after a certain period of time, it's, what do I need this for? So you get rid of it and you think, well, I don't need it. I'm in a secure job. I'm never going to look for another job again. And now here we sit. So it's never too late to start that process. Yes?
This is going to probably tie in the last section too about keywords. If
The
Should I put the word non-degree program, electronics, Navy, or?
Here, we're going to get there, okay? One question. His question is, he has experience through the military, but he doesn't have a degree. And how do I say that I have some of this knowledge without having it be just blatantly no degree, okay? I'll come back to that, okay? Because I think there's something that will answer that. If you have any kind of continuing education, workshops, seminars, a Dale Carnegie training, how to resolve conflict in the workplace, how to work with diversified personnel, things of that nature, anything like that, list that information down. You don't necessarily have to have the dates in which you did those things, but the fact that you had training in those areas could help make a difference. Community service, memberships, affiliations, and they should be work related. If you're affiliated with the Tri-Cities Kids League, well, I'm not sure how that really relates to me being a production control manager. And again, any certificates, patents, anything that your name may be on is good information. There's a lot of great people out there looking for work right now that have their names on patents. And if you are one of them and don't have that and are not taking credit for that, make sure that you do.
Did you put that together, you know, like all the certificates and things that you, if you happen to acquire, kept them? You just bring that folder to the interview if you get that far?
Okay, the question is, what do I do with all of these certificates? How do I present them to the interviewer, or how do I have an opportunity to do that? That's all part of creating a portfolio, which is even a whole nother session that we could get into, but having a portfolio of accomplishments and making that statement in your cover letter to say, I have a portfolio of accomplishments I'd be happy to display or I'd like to present at my interview. Okay, we've got a lot to cover in 3 minutes. Okay, quickly, in response to your question, if you have been in the military service, please take credit for that. And if you've been in and you are honorably discharged, please tell me that. If there was a field in which you worked, which I think I'm addressing your question, if you worked electronics within the United States Navy, tell them what your specialty was. Maybe you give them the rank in which you were discharged. Okay? Because veterans are given preferential treatment for jobs that are out there. And rightly so. Put your most important information at the top and work down. Okay? So you might be a recent graduate. So as a recent graduate, your education should be at the top. But if you've been out of the college for several years, it's your work experience that you want on there. Don't overuse highlighting, italics, make it easy. We already know it's about you, so you don't have to do the I, we, me, that sort of thing. You wouldn't include your desired salary in your resume either. That, if they're requesting it, would be something they'd look for in a cover letter, which we don't have time to talk about. And again, proofread, can't talk to you enough about that. Have 2 or 3 people just take a look at it. What is it that somebody else might see that I may have missed? And if you do have problems writing a resume, putting something down on paper, find someone who can help you. It could either be my comrade here, Mr. Ken Soper, or myself. There are other people out there because not everybody can write and get their point across. And you all have the handout, so there's additional information that we did not cover that you can have as a resource later. If you have any additional questions, feel free to contact myself. I'll be around for the rest of the day. I do have another session that we'll be doing at 1 o'clock. Other than that, thank you so much for coming.